Hey, what's up, everybody? My name is Bilawal Sidhu. I'm a creative technologist and the host of the TED AI show. And today I have the distinct pleasure of sitting down with the man, the myth, the legend, Vinod Khosla. How are you doing today?
It's great to be here.
So you gave a TED Talk this past April. You made 12 predictions about the future, or plausible futures as you described them.
Yeah.
Let's go into them in detail, shall we?
Sure.
We got to address the Luddites too a bit in this. So I think a lot of skeptics, when they listen to this, almost feel like, wait, what are you talking about? In this world of abundance, money's not going to matter. You're like taking away the thing that I draw income from. Let's say like a graphic designer that isn't getting the same gigs anymore, or is getting pressured to work at lower rates because, hey, aren't you using AI to do all of this? Is it that the transition that you mentioned is not going to happen in a 20-year period, maybe a 50-year period? Is that going to be a rocky transition? Because right now, viscerally, the signs of what people are saying is like, yo, you're cutting off my sources of income while telling me that across the horizon is this beautiful future. What would you say to those?
I think that's the biggest challenge facing society and how we address it with policy.
I see.
For example, if we were to acknowledge GDP or GDP equivalent, and I'll call it equivalent instead of taking current measures of GDP, which are around a basket of goods, which may cost a fraction less, so GDP is actually declining. But let's say real production of goods and services goes from 2% growth, which is what is today globally, roughly, to 5% or 6%. We will have enough access to take care of the people who need taking care of. Almost all the basic services, like personal education, like primary care, or other medical care, will start to approach zero. Not everything, there are things depending upon physical stuff, like more steel. That'll not be as easy, more to get to zero. But almost certainly we'll have deflationary pressures, in my view, but a rapid increase in the sets of goods and services we produce because AI is either producing them or help produce them. I'll give you an example. Most people say, well, we don't have enough lithium or cobalt or manganese to make all the batteries for everything electric.
Right. Yeah.
I almost certainly am willing to bet that 20 years from now, we will have many more of these resources we think will be short than we have today.
We keep finding them all the time, right? And we're not even really looking.
Yeah. And we saw this happen in oil in the 1960s. People declared peak oil. Well, I argue not only have we not started looking other than wherever there's stuff on the surface, like lithium carbonate on the surface someplace in a lake bed or something like that. We haven't started to develop the technologies that let us look under the surface of the earth. And we haven't started to look at how do you get steel to go 10 times further, so we need 10x less steel. So my bet is resource discovery will explode because of AI technologies in the sensors and diagnostics and tools we develop to collect more data, and then the AI we develop to make much more of the data we do collect. So I do think that's one direction. But there's another direction that I'm excited about. I call it dematerializing the world. So today you buy a car, you drive it on average in the US about 12,000 miles a year. Now imagine the same 2,000 to 4,000 pounds of steel to carry two people on average was 1,000 pounds of steel in a public transit vehicle that was self-driving. So you never had to wait for a schedule. Public transit without a schedule. It shows up when you show up. No, you don't share it. It goes to where you're going and it drops you off. No traffic lights on the way, nothing. Turns out the street capacity of every street in existing cities can be significantly increased, like 5x to 10x. You can put the capacity of a light rail system in a bicycle lane width. So we're designing a public transit system around bicycle lane width public transit that's on demand like an Uber. And if you get off your job at 1 a.m., something shows up and you have a personal, not a shared vehicle. There's no schedule to public transit. It's point to point, and it's on demand. It is cheaper than owning a car. It's faster than a chauffeured car, so you don't have to worry about parking in either case. What's wrong with this? Not only that, now that 1,000 pounds of steel is driving maybe 120,000 miles.
Yeah.
So you've reduced the amount of steel you need for cars by 10x. So you've dematerialized transportation, increased throughput capacity of our existing streets. You've not said, let's knock down every building on both sides to widen the street. And so these things not only are imaginable, they're starting to happen, and that's driven by self-driving technology. Now, a Waymo approach to self-driving will cause increased congestion, just like Uber and Lyft caused increased congestion on our streets. But this approach of self-driving public transit allows me to say it's possible or plausible we will remove most cars from most cities, dematerialize transportation with much less steel needed to meet our requirements, and afford everybody this kind of very personalized, rapid, congestion-free experience in cities. So I'm very excited about that.
This seems to be a theme in your predictions too. The plausible futures that you're painting don't necessarily try to disrupt the status quo completely. They try to integrate with it where possible and slot into existing infrastructure that may exist, just to make it easier to adopt. I mean, could you talk a little bit about that in the context of power too, right? Like people are talking.
Well, so there's two things we're talking about,
Yeah.
power,
Yeah.
and also traditional things like steel, green steel with climate-oriented
Sure, yeah.
steel
Cement,
and
whatever.
cement.
Yeah.
Power. Today, we are putting pressure to shut down every coal plant. I think it's much smarter to build a fusion boiler and just replace the boiler in existing coal plants, and maybe the boiler and the turbine, because there's some nuances to matching steam condition. But you're not rebuilding 5,000 power plants in the US, you're upgrading them. Now those incumbents, which are fighting climate change because they don't want their assets, their coal plants to go, or natural gas power plants to go out of business, they become your allies because you're building a plan to upgrade.
The incentives are aligned.
Yeah. And frankly, with super hot geothermal, which very few people are working on, you could actually drill under a coal plant, and most of the western United States, you could produce 450-degree steam. Geothermal is a bad idea the way it's being done. It's mostly done at 200, 250, sometimes 300 degrees. At 450 and supercritical steam, you get 10 times the amount of power from the same geothermal well. Now, what happens to that? It becomes cheaper than natural gas, not much more expensive. You don't pay more, and you might use the same coal or natural gas power plant. And it's persistent power. Solar and wind are great. They become a reasonably large percentage, but this is dispatchable power. You want to watch TV when the wind, not when the wind is blowing or the sun shining. You want to watch it when the NFL game is on, right? And so dispatchable power is important. So whether it's fusion boilers to replace coal boilers or super hot geothermal, power can be plentiful. It takes one breakthrough only, and that's how do you drill at very high temperatures, because normal metal bits collapse at 450 degrees, and you can't drill through hard granite rock that's at 450 degrees. But that's a solvable technical problem. So that's one side of the equation. I'm also pretty excited about the other side of the climate fight. In cement, we've opened a cement plant. Instead of environmentalists, we have a cement plant here that's being shut down by the environmentalists. And of course, the owners fight that, right? They're losing an asset.
Yeah.
Our approach is we take the carbon dioxide the plant is emitting, with no more limestone coming into the plant, turn the carbon dioxide into more cement. And we have this operating in Northern California. Now, every cement plant in the world could be upgraded and not take as much input. So same ton of limestone coming in will produce much more cement than it's producing today. The cost per ton would be lower, so everybody will be happy, whether it's consumers of cement or producers of cement. And the incumbents get to keep their plants and assets in production. So if we can do that for power plants, for cement, I hope we can do it for steel. Steel's a harder problem. So not every problem is solvable this way, but the more we can do this, the better off we will be. And I think creative solutions exist. They involve solving some hard technical problem. And that brings me back to those AI scientists that'll help us accelerate this discovery. Is there a new material that drills better? Or is there a better drilling technology? People are trying to use microwaves or lasers for drilling. Those are all good attempts. And most will fail, but you only need one in each area to succeed for us to completely change an industry. And I do think we will have great climate solutions that are economic, that don't defy the laws of economic gravity, which is what the people who fight climate change policy fight against, is we can't increase prices. Now, I happen to disagree with them.
What do you think about the view that, actually we as a society should be reducing power consumption over time?
I think that's a Luddite view.
Care to elaborate on that a bit more?
Look at London today.
Yeah.
Okay. Their answer to congestion is congestion pricing. To reduce traffic, reduce the number of people who get to the center of London. So limiting consumption in a world of abundance is a bad idea if a better solution is available. And I'm saying public transit like Glidewise would make that available. Many more people could get in and out of London on the same streets much, much faster than even with congestion pricing, and of course, much cheaper. Totally. And much more accessibly and equitably. I don't care about London's congestion pricing. I can afford it. Not everybody can. And that's where equality matters, to create enough capacity for increased demand from everybody. And a trip to the center costs almost nothing.
It's fascinating to me that you're still striking me as a moderate, because on one hand, you've got, let's say, people saying, hey, we should be lowering our power consumption. Like, let's not use more energy than we need. On the other hand, I'm like, I live in Austin, Texas, and you mentioned the whole car idea. Like, most people I know have like 3 cars. They got their pickup truck, they've got their like fast SUV, and they got some sort of an electric vehicle. That's like pretty inefficient. They're not maximally utilizing the resources that were poured into those vehicles, but that's a bit of the Americana charm. You make it, you get what you want. What you're advocating for is something almost in the middle, where we should be more efficient with the resources we have, yet still keep going towards this world of abundance.
Choice.
Okay.
Give people choice.
Okay. Yeah.
Right? Most of the time, I don't want to drive a car in city traffic.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know anybody who'd prefer to drive if they could get there faster.
Yeah.
And not have to worry about parking.
Yeah.
And it's on demand, it's private, right? It is clean. That's much better. I'll do it every single time. But I won't if I have to do it, or the train only leaves or the bus only leaves on the hour. Then I have to change what I want to do to what the transit system does. So if you're reducing friction to these use, you'll increase demand. Now, that doesn't mean if I can afford it, I won't take my sports car out for a run on a weekend.
Yeah.
That's a whole different use case. And I think we will see more diversity in use cases and more choice.
Maybe if you're commuting, you'd rather take this amazing, much faster experience where it's like still as good as an Uber without the traffic congestion and like obviously fully autonomous. So it's like autonomous doesn't mean you're sacrificing autonomy, because you're still sort of making the choice based on the occasion. Within a city, transportation can be made drastically more efficient, right? Everyone can have that experience of a beautiful car that takes them from point A to point B. They don't have to wait for it. They don't have to worry about parking. It's just there for you. So that itself is game changing. But I think another area where we've seen some stagnation is interstate travel, right? So I got on a plane that is substantially similar to the plane that existed in the 1960s to come from Austin to Palo Alto to do this interview. But clearly there's disruption afoot in air flight as well.
Yeah. So all forms of transportation will do better. We've talked about public transit, much more capacity. And by the way, if you solve congestion, a 30-minute commute takes you out much, much further. And that means housing gets solved as part of the process.
Oh, yeah.
And we can dematerialize transportation, but also housing. And there's things we are doing in housing too that dematerialize housing, much less weight per house. Sort of silly, a two-story building may weigh hundreds of thousands of pounds to support a couple of 100 or 200-pound humans. It's sort of silly. But there are solutions to that. But I'm also very excited by, say, much faster flight, Mach 5 flight. So you can do London to New York at Mach 5 or 4,000 miles per hour in 90 minutes. The world becomes much, much smaller and cooler.
Brunch in London.
I could go to Tokyo just for the weekend, trivially. So it's only a failure of imagination, the fact that after the Concorde, we stopped working on the problem because, again, the experts decided this wasn't economic, entirely economic. So I'm very excited about what we can do with transportation. And of course, that problem gets eased by AI scientists that I talked about before, because new materials design will become much more feasible, better engine design. So AI scientists will help in all aspects of this. I'm also pretty excited about manufacturing in general. Many more things can be done much more efficiently if we biomanufacture it. We use a lot of land to grow cotton, for example. A lot of land. We use a lot of land to grow cattle feed. Alfalfa, which is grown in lots of places, and soy and corn, of course, to feed to animals. Let's take these one at a time. You could biomanufacture textiles that have very precise properties, maybe the best parts of cotton, the recyclability of, say, nylon, those things. So I do think we will do much better at manufacturing when we perfect biomanufacturing, which basically doesn't exist except in the pharmaceutical industry and in some narrow areas of manufacturing. And other manufacturing technologies, with the help of precision AI, will get much better. So manufacturing will get a resolution, but I'm specifically excited about what biomanufacturing could do. And we haven't started to innovate there very much. And so I'm hoping some entrepreneur listening will step up and say, hey, we don't need to dedicate all this cotton fields and all this water to cotton growth. Same thing with food. The principal ingredient of food on this planet, nitrogen, fertilizer, is produced with a process from the 1800s, the Haber-Bosch process. Nature produces fertilizer very differently. A lightning storm turns nitrogen in the air into nitrates that plant uses as fertilizer. We're starting to follow nature's path and put, in fact, I say lightning in a bottle, so we can produce nitrogen the way nature fixes nitrogen from a gas in the air to a nitrate a plant can use.
Form of biomimicry almost.
Yes, you can call it that. So that. But also we can produce proteins much better. Now, some people say to me, well, I'll always prefer regular meat. Very inefficient to produce, climate-wise a disaster. But here's the thing, almost certainly 10 years from now, the plant protein meat you eat will be far tastier than cows. Cows don't evolve very much. We are still in cow 1.0. plant meat 10.0 will be so much better. Already, you look at the taste tests on an Impossible Foods Juicy Burger, which is sold at Five Guys.
Totally, yeah.
Most people can't tell which one is real meat and which one isn't. And if you Google it, there's a hilarious clip of Glenn Beck on Fox News saying, "I'm a cattle rancher, I can always tell my meat." And he gets to taste two burgers and he picks the wrong one as plant-based. It's hilarious. But, I'd say about half the people can't differentiate a high-end Impossible Food Juicy Burger from regular meat. 10 years from now, that won't even be a close contest. And so you will prefer the plant-based meat. But here's the fun part. Today, we have soy and corn to produce it.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite projects to take protein out of alfalfa. So cows eat alfalfa and convert the protein with single-digit percentage efficiency into meat on your table.
Right, yeah. Bypass the cow.
And thousands of gallons of water to produce a couple of pounds of meat. And so I think it's 3,000 liters of water to produce 1 kilogram of beef on your table. And of course, lots of 15 kilograms of corn and soy. If you can extract the protein directly out of the alfalfa, instead of single-digit percentage efficiency, you get very high efficiency. And a product, by the way, that's more complete than whey protein, more soluble than whey protein, so it tastes better.
I want that.
Coming to a store near you soon.
Okay.
But look, whether any one idea I'm talking about works or not doesn't matter.
Totally.
Right? My view is we have to have enough shots on goal in each of these areas. We only need one to succeed. One green cement to be cheaper than regular cement, one green steel, one fusion power plant. There's a dozen credible efforts in fusion. I'm very excited about that. So this idea that you can convince yourself one particular idea won't work is not important. In fact, most people say improbables are unimportant. I argue only the improbables are important. We just don't know which improbable is important because most of them will fail. And that's okay with me. That's the world I live in. And when you get that one breakthrough, one Tesla car, one Mach 5 aircraft, one better protein, that's all you need to completely transform the world. Right? And that's why these plausible tomorrows are so possible. In fact, I see no reason they shouldn't happen. Now, incumbents might slow them down. An entrepreneur may not come along trying to make that vision, their passion for that vision happen, not get through the ups and downs of any of these cycles. There's economic cycles, funding cycles, lots of reasons these things may get slowed down. But almost all of them are inevitable because they're possible technically and economically. And those are the only core variables. It just needs the right entrepreneurs to come adapt these visions and make this new world happen. That makes me very bullish.
Speaking of bulls, what did you think of Florida banning lab-grown meat? They didn't ban plant-derived meat, but they banned lab-grown meat. Is that yet another example of Luddites?
Well, no, it's actually, that's a very important point. It's not an example of Luddites.
Yeah.
It's an example of incumbent interests.
Oh yeah.
Trying to fight change. So the meat producers, the ranchers hate this idea of an alternative source of meat, and so they have influence with Florida's government. And so in every area, the incumbents will fight it unless you can bring them along, like I talked about.
Love it, yeah.
Now, Florida ranchers may fight it, but the farmers growing alfalfa may actually love it. And so there will always be shifts of interest, and that's always painful in a battle.
When people talk about sort of the, we got to just keep accelerating, keep going forward, progress is all you need. And then you got the pump the brakes camp, right? When you think about, when you zoom out and view sort of human society as like a unified system, do you think that all these roles of sort of like the experts that are always going to say this is never going to happen, like is that role important? Are the policymakers important such that in the grand scheme of things, we sort of balance each other out and don't have some crazy escalation?
So I'm a techno-optimist, but I'm not what they call accelerationist at any cost, right? You can't leave people behind. You can't leave the bulk of society behind and serve the need of 1% of the people.
That's the empathy point that you brought up.
So to me, techno-optimism only works if you apply it with empathy and care for everybody and bringing everybody along. And the thing about acceleration or techno-optimism is it creates much more to share. And so there will be enough to share. You know, if the per capita GDP grows from 2% to, and careful again about definitions of GDP, to 5%, in 50 years, we create so much abundance. The per capita income will be so high, there'll be enough to share. So now, there'll be a redistribution problem, which is a role for policy. How do you bring everybody along? But that's what democracy is great at. If people are left behind, they will object, and techno-optimism will not work. And so that's why it has to be applied with empathy and care and bringing everybody along.
One last question. This wouldn't be a AI podcast if we didn't talk about geopolitics just a little bit. When you zoom out and look at what's happening on the global scale, everyone's working on a sovereign AI initiative, which means there's buying NVIDIA GPUs, seemingly is what it seems to be. There's also talk about getting to AGI first. However you define it, there's this belief, and I think, it's very nicely articulated by an ex-OpenAI employee. Leopold Aschenbrenner, outlined this in in a wonderful essay called Situational Awareness, basically making the case that whichever organization gets to AGI, even if it's 6 months before another group, the gap will just be so massive because you'll have those AI scientists that you talked about making the next set of breakthroughs that you'll never be able to catch up. At the same time, when you're talking about these massive sensing apparatuses of the world, like, just like sensing and measuring different aspects of life and society, that's currently in the regime largely of sovereign powers in the world. So what do you see happening on a geopolitical level? Is this globalization? Is it deglobalization? Or are we all just, building NVIDIA GPUs and hoping that, this AGI thing is as important as we think it is?
So there's multiple things to talk about. First, I do believe who gets to AGI first will have a huge advantage. And there's fundamentally two camps in the world. Liberal values, which is mostly in the West, but also in other parts of the world like India or Australia. So liberal values, a different political philosophy, and a Chinese political philosophy, which is fundamentally it's okay to suppress the minority if most of the people are doing much better. And that's a reasonable framing of what President Xi considers a better political system. I'm going to argue this is a choice for people to make. I prefer liberal values and not ignoring some small fraction, some minority, so that the average or the median in society can do much better, which is really the Chinese philosophy. They also have other goals like making up for the 100 years of shame and other political manifestations. And I do think it's a fundamentally different social order, and whoever wins the AGI race will win the economic race. And because of the economic race, will win the right to influence culture and political philosophy in the rest of the world. And so it's very important we win that. And I'm in the camp that says anything we can do to slow China down and accelerate our approach is a good thing. So I very much believe in Leo's approach to this. Let me add one other thing that I think is taken for granted. It's taken for granted that more data matters, more compute matters, that there's a current belief that scaling is the only way to get to AGI.
Yeah, scale data, scale compute, and you're good.
And scaling is sufficient. And in fact, it's very possible, in fact, likely it will be sufficient. But that doesn't mean there aren't other approaches, like neurosymbolic approaches or other kinds of intelligences that won't be more efficient at it or better at it or better at some things.
More explainable.
More explainable, more reasoning oriented, strong. It's hard to tell. And so I don't think the chapter on how we get to AGI is written yet. And too many people are assuming it's done and scale is all that matters. And I do think scale matters more than most people think. But there may be other ways, better ways, cleverer ways. Maybe we won't need all these power-hungry NVIDIA GPUs. In fact, I think it's pretty likely there's types of things we can do much more efficiently than just an LLM or a deep learning model. Look at human beings. When we started studying education in humans, we started defining types of human intelligences. I think Dan Goleman defined 6 types of human intelligence and later increased it to 9. There's no reason different approaches won't do each type of intelligence better. It's also possible one approach of scaling LLMs will do every type of intelligence better. But I think there's a lot more to discover, a lot more unknown than we assume today.
I think the federation of approaches feels like the right thing. A federation of models working in concert to do something versus...
Makes logical sense.
It makes logical sense versus the biggest model.
Humans do pattern recognition.
Yeah.
Humans do reasoning. Yeah. Humans do probabilistic guessing. So could probabilistic programming do really well? Yes, in some things. Could neurosymbolic reasoning do well? Yes, in some things. It's possible. And there's yet a lot more to be invented and a lot more research to be done and some of these to be hybridized. And so I do think we will see a lot more evolution in the next decade.